All right, thank you all for joining us today. As most of you know, the goal of Thrive is to help other small businesses do the best that they can and be the best that they can be. We want to be a resource for you. So that's why we've started this Lunch and Learn. We hope you can join us. If you have any topics that you'd like to hear about, we have a lot of experts that we can bring in. And we want to ultimately be able to provide you with the knowledge that you need in order to succeed and grow as best as you can. And with that, we are going to introduce our presenter of the day, Grant Wasch. Grant and I have worked together for a while. Grant works with companies to solve business challenges and help with operational issues. He specializes in helping clients find the right technologies to increase efficiencies. He has over 17 years in business and management experience from startup companies to multi-million-dollar industries, and we are going to lead on with Grant to help you find the right project management software. So Grant, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dina. Appreciate that. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for joining our Lunch and Learn series. As Dina mentioned, I'm going to be talking about choosing the right software, and then we're going to give an example of project management software in particular. So with that, let's jump in. 37%. What is that number? Is that the number of amount of time we're saving by not sitting in traffic right now? No, it's not. It is the amount of the percentage of software that is unused on the average computer. That adds up to potentially a lot of money for some organizations. So what are the reasons for this unused software? So these are the most common in our experience. So for instance, we had one client, they're a doctor's office, and they implemented a new practice management software. And they had an error in importing their old data into the new system. And one of the key requirements they needed was reporting. And so all of a sudden now, this new key component was unusable because they had doubled and tripled the number of accounts, so they weren't able to get the right data. So then they had to kind of take a whole step backwards and redo the whole process, which was the failure. And then there was another instance that kind of accomplished all three of these other problems. A friend of mine works for a big company, and a couple years back, they implemented a huge CRM project, multi-million-dollars. But beforehand, they never got buy-in from any of the sales staff or any staff. They just decided, hey, we're going to roll this out from the top down. They did not roll out effective training. They just sent out a PDF, said, here you go. And then they didn't establish what the processes and standards were, when this information needed to go in, how it needed to go in, what data. And so basically what happened was they had this very expensive software that sat mostly unused for over a year. And then they had to step back and create a new initiative to restart the whole CRM effort. And now they got it going, but there was much more cost involved. Had they just done it right the first time, they could have saved. So anytime you're going to implement software, or our clients do, we always recommend that they be able to answer these questions. What are your goals for the software? What are the objectives? What are you trying to accomplish with this? Don't just do it because someone says you need to do it. You need to be able to tell why. Who's going to be using this software? Is it going to be all staff? Is it going to be just one department? Is it going to be a specific team for one project? You need to think through that. What are the requirements? What functionality is needed for whatever your goal is? So does it need to be cloud-based? Do you need an app? Does it need to integrate with certain things? All of those need to be factored in so you can figure out what the right solution is. And lastly, what's the process that's going to facilitate usage? How are you going to make sure that your staff is using this and it's streamlining and making things more efficient and you're getting the most value out of it? All of those need to kind of be figured out and thought about ahead of time to make sure this is a success. These, based on our experience, are some examples of goals for new software. So some clients are looking to move from paper to digital. They want to make sure that they have all of their information with them on the go, wherever they are. That way they've got answers if they have questions or whatever it might be. Some are looking to add automation. They want to, for instance, close a project which will then automatically create an invoice which can quickly be reviewed and sent to the client rather than having to do each step manually, which takes time. They could be looking to consolidate multiple systems. We had one client that had a system for project management, one for time tracking, and then a separate one for billing and accounting. So they had to enter data in each one of those systems, which took a lot of time. And you also have the risk of data entry mistakes as you're doing it in multiple systems. And then there's Excel, very powerful tool, but some people are using it to run most of their company. And that can create problems. We had one client, a construction client exactly, and they almost submitted a bid that was $20,000 under because one of their formulas didn't include a specific cell that had that amount in it. And they would have probably potentially had a loss on that project had they not been able to catch that right before. So if you use specific software that's designed for these things, all of that can be alleviated. And lastly, you want to be able to they want to be able to streamline their current process with this new software. So we had a law office we worked with. They had a lot of manual processes. One, for instance, was their administrative staff was creating the engagement letters each time. So for each new matter, they'd have to hand create this letter. And so we were able to set up templates in the software where once they created the new record for the contact, the new client, they pushed a button and it auto-generated in seconds the letter, which then the lawyer could review it and then they could send it to the client. So it saved 10, sometimes 15 minutes. And throughout the year, that adds up a lot. So time savings and efficiency are a common theme here. So what I want to walk through now is our personal implementation process that we use for clients. And we're going to go through the next couple slides in much more detail. So I just want to lay it out here for everyone to see. And ideally, this starts with and ends with change management. You've got to try to get buy-in when possible from the company and the staff to make sure this is a success. But the initial first step is the current state analysis. Then you do the software assessment, what software is out there. Then you look at the future process that's going to be used and design that. Then you implement the software. And finally, you come back to and finish with the change management piece, the training, getting everyone truly on board to move forward. So starting with phase one, the current state analysis. Here, you start with gathering the requirements. What does this need to do? What integrations does it need? Does it need to talk to the current accounting software? A lot of people use QuickBooks, and a lot of softwares out there, they have great integrations with QuickBooks, so you aren't entering things twice. Does it need to be app-based? Is your team mobile? Are you out in the field? They need to have access to the data there. All of these things need to be factored in and then prioritized with the top criteria that the software has to meet. You want to define the users. Most softwares nowadays are all user-based, so there's a certain fee tied to each user. Some are unlimited based on user, but most costs per. So if you're trying to figure out what the total cost is, you need to understand how many people are going to be using it. Then you need to define what the current process is. What are they doing now to get the data in? What's their means of working? So you understand how to adapt that with the software and then define what the new process becomes. You need to understand where they're starting. And then what current software are you using? You need to understand that so you see what the different software packages are, what the integrations need to be. And lastly, look at the data. Especially if it needs to be imported, does that data need to be cleaned? Or does it need to be scrapped and you need to start over? All of that needs to be assessed so you understand the total implementation phase. Next is the software assessment phase. So here you need to review those requirements and work with the client to prioritize, okay, so here are the top 5 must-haves, here's the ones we'd like to have. And then once you figure those out, then you look at the type of software needed. Is it accounting? Is it project management? Is it practice management? Or is it an ERP? ERPs can be more expensive in the short term, but they can save you more money in the long run because you're only paying for one software and you can save a lot of time by everything happening in one place. Then you need to decide, okay, is there a software that already exists out there? Or do we need to create something custom? We have a very unique business, nothing exists out there. If it's just basic project management software, there's so many options out there. I'm sure you can find one that's going to meet your needs. Then you need to evaluate what those softwares are that once you figure out what kind. And what we do is we go through and we create a top list. And then we really do a deep dive and create a scorecard for each one of those. So then we can make sure which one's best for our client. And lastly, we create that recommendation. Say, here you go. If this was us, this is what we would use. And then we work with them. Then the next phase is the future process. What is it going to look like when we utilize this software to be more efficient? So we got to first quickly review our current process. What are we doing now? And then for some reason, why have we been doing this? A lot of times companies do the same thing because that's what they've always done. Someone comes in, they train them, hey, this is what we do. Objectively, a third party can come in and say, why are you doing this? Does this make sense? Is that a value-added process? Value-added step in the process? And a lot of times the answer is probably no, or maybe it's a yes. But either way, you need to take that look and truly understand. And then you can design what the new process is going to look like. Okay, so when is the data going to be entered? Who's entering it? When, is it monthly? Is it weekly? Is it daily? All of those things can be defined. And lastly is automation. A lot of the new softwares all have automation and workflows built in. So when you create, one step, it automatically does the next, or whether there's an approval that goes up to the manager, all of that can be automated within the system, which all saves time and creates those efficiencies. Implementation is the next phase. So this is where we set up the account with the client, and then we start to customize. The customization is key to make sure it works exactly how you need it to. This is where looking back at that criteria and those requirements help establish what these preferences are. What's the nomenclature for naming files? How are things labeled? All of these things need to be factored in, and who's the workflow? All of that can be programmed in the preferences. All of that is set there. And then what's the data that's imported in? Did it need to be clean, like I mentioned before? If it does, then go ahead and import the data. And then lastly is start building those training guides. The user guides are what's going to help with training and getting everybody on the same page, utilizing screenshots, step-by-step directions. So that way, after the training's done, someone can look back and has that reference if they need to have questions or whatever it might be. And lastly is the change management. I think probably the most important to make sure that this implementation has the effect and the success that you want. Train the staff on the new software, whether that's in person or it's virtual nowadays. You need to have that set aside time where they can walk through the software, they can ask questions, and they can figure out exactly how to use it. Establish what the new processes are. How are they using it? When are they using it? What information needs to be captured and when, so that way you make sure that you get the correct reports. So the reporting is important. Build those metrics. So for CRM, for instance, make sure that the activity of your salespeople is getting inputted in. Tell them it needs to be inputted every Friday by close of business. So then you can run a report on Monday that shows what the team's doing. You can review that in your meetings. All of these things play a part in the process and making things more efficient. And lastly, make sure to, once you roll out the software, set some regular check-ins with the staff to make sure they don't have questions, they don't have problems, they're understanding it, and they're enjoying using it. And hopefully it's making the whole goal is to make their job easier and hopefully make the company more efficient and better. So now I'm going to walk you through the project management software example specifically. And we're going to look at the difference between task management software and project management software. So these are the core functionalities of both sets of software. So task management, they're kind of used interchangeably. So task management specifically is more focused on to-do items. It can manage projects, but it's much more focused on singular, like we're going to design a website, for instance. So these are the steps, here's who's involved, versus project management, which is used for more complex projects, usually multiple projects, larger ones where you've got lots of stakeholders, you've got different kinds of people you need to keep track of. You need to keep track of costs and overall progress. So it's a little bit more involved. So an example I found that I thought was pretty nice was task management is kind of like a 100-meter hurdle race. It's very linear. It's great at keeping, and so the hurdles are the tasks. Sorry, I meant to mention that. So you can assign those tasks to different team members. You can prioritize those, and then you can see the progress. And for those of you that don't, real quick timeout, what a Kanban view is, I want to explain that. It's the card view. It has lanes and then it has cards to show different phases. And so as you make progress on a task, you can manually move it on the screen. And so it's a much more visual way of seeing versus just a table with percentages of completion. So it's just a visual view that's become very popular in the last couple of years. So then looking at the project management software versus the task management, project management is more like a basketball game or a series of basketball games where you've got coaches, which are the stakeholders. You got multiple players, which are team members. You've got different deadlines, different schedules. All of these things need to be managed. And project management software is set up to be able to handle many more variables and many more different components. What is the overall progress of every project? What are the costs? Gantt charts. Those are, for those of you who don't know, it's a set of horizontal lines that show the schedule, shows milestones, and gives you a visual depiction of where you are within the calendar. So it's a great way of seeing overall progress, and it's a key component of project management software. So with all of that said, I just wanted to say that there are overlaps, but you need to understand what your needs are. So these are some of the most highly regarded task management options. And like I said, Asana, a lot of people throw in the project management, but it's much more flexible. So it can handle specific tasks, but it also can be used to manage projects. But again, it's a little more linear. I'm not going to go into all of these. They're great options. The Microsoft To Do that's included in your Office 365 for free if you already pay for it. Some of these all have free options. So if you're a small business, you only have 1 or 2 people, these are great. Most of these all have the availability of working collaboratively, so you can assign the tasks and see how they progress. So these are great for most companies. But if you've got a much larger company with much larger projects, then you probably need project management specific software. So these are some of the criteria that fall within that. So you probably want a dashboard view so you can see all of your projects in one view. What's the progress? Are there any risks? What's holding things up? All of that can be seen. Time tracking, because that immediately feeds into billing and costs. Are you going to have cost overruns on your project? All of those things need to factor in. A lot of times project management software is a one-stop shop. So you've got document management, you've got team management, kind of Slack communication all built in, so you don't have to integrate with too many third-party softwares. And lastly, I want to mention, emails. All of these have email integration, which is important because some people still like to use email, and so therefore you can set the integration so it sends the reminder if you have something that pops up, or if something's completed by another team member, you can get an email notification. But lastly is cost. A lot of times these project management software packages are much more expensive, and they run the gamut of $15 to $20 per user, all the way up to multiple thousands of dollars per year for unlimited use. So it depends, again, goes back to requirements and needs. So these are some of the top project management options that exist. Some are cheaper than others, and all of them have different strengths. So you need, again, figure out what's most important to you, or work with a consultant who can tell you, hey, based on your requirements, this is what's going to be best for you. And then how do we use it effectively? The key takeaways here: make sure you have a plan. Don't just say, hey, I'm going to implement the software because someone told me to. Make sure you understand why are you spending money? What are your objectives? What are your goals? And then with that, what are the requirements? How is this going to help you? What do you need it to do for you? Make sure the software fits those needs. That's key. It's got to, otherwise you're just wasting your time and money. And then change management. That is, I've reiterated a couple of times, it is absolutely critical to make sure this sticks and make sure your staff uses it. Unfortunately, people dislike change. It's hard. People get, stuck in their ways. They like doing things a specific way. But in order for you to be profitable and be as efficient as possible as a company, these softwares can help. So make sure your team and your staff understand how it can help and how it can make their job hopefully easier and the company, more efficient and better. Lastly, if the technology is not your focus, if you aren't someone that loves technology, then reach out to someone that can help you. We're here at Thrive. We're happy to answer questions or consult with you or help any way we can. No need to stress yourself out if it's not something you enjoy doing. All right, that's it. Let's take any questions we have.
All right, thank you very much, Rand, for all that. I love your key takeaways. I think they're really on target and really helpful for anybody who needs to make any kind of software change. So first of all, thank you everyone for who is here. If you have any questions, please you can message them, or we have the QA. Next week, Jeff Friedman is going to be talking about business development in a digital era, so make sure to join for that. But for now, we're going to pass the mic on to Jeff to ask Grant some questions that people have asked.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Grant. We did have a couple questions that came in beforehand, and I think you hit on some of them, but I want to make sure we cover all these. So one of the questions was, when we look at these, project management or even task management software, I know you gave a whole lot of options there. Do you think it should be cloud-based or local-based in your mind?
Thanks, Jeff. I think in today's age, we should strive to have everything based in the cloud. It just provides us with a lot more flexibility. With local based, you've got to worry about setting up a VPN to remote in. It just adds a level of complexity. And with how efficient the cloud has become, I think that's really the best way forward. And honestly, I think it's probably gonna be cheaper for most companies.
And that kind of takes me to the next question. So thanks for that, Grant. I know you talked at one point about pricing being based on the number of users, size of the team, obviously all the needs. Is there kind of a range that you look at with some of these recommended solutions that you have out here so that business owners can kind of have that in the back of their mind, whether it's the flat rate, the monthly rate, or even the per user rate? What's kind of that range that they're looking at?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, for the subscription model, which most of these are going to have, the bigger software, sometimes you do get the flat annual fee, which can be hefty if you're looking at some of these more involved project management softwares. But for the monthly subscriptions, I do recommend, you're going to need this for the next couple of years, pay for it annually. It's going to decrease that cost. But I mean, you can look from anywhere, like I said, there's some that are free for the base package for some of these task management, which, hey, if you only have 2 or 3 users, that's great. But for most businesses, you're going to look to be paying anywhere from $10 to $15 per user up to $100 per user. So it really depends on the size of your organization to determine what that total cost is.
So I appreciate that. I think that's really good direction to have. Obviously, a lot of people are using Excel, like you had mentioned, and want to be more efficient. So knowing kind of what the price hurdle is going to be is certainly going to be valuable.
Yeah, you got a budget for that. You're right, Jeff.
You had given a whole lot of criteria, obviously, in the early part of, figuring out what software you need. Obviously, one of the differences being task manager, project management. But in your opinion, what are the top 3 things that people need to think about, business owners need to think about when they're evaluating what platform they want to move their management onto?
Yeah, great question. There isn't a top 3 for everyone. That's one thing. Every company and every industry is very specific. But I mean, so I'll just list a couple that I think everyone should make sure they have. So for me, I think cloud-based is critical. I think you need to be able to integrate with your emails. You need to be able to assign tasks and see task priority. And then you need to be able to integrate with some kind of communication platform, whether it's Slack or there's a built-in communication platform within the software. So that way you can send messages or alerts to team members. So that way you're not having Johnny kept checking in with Rose. Hey, did you finish that yet? I need to get that completed before I can do the next step. So it just goes to efficiency.
No, that makes complete sense. And obviously that's one of the big goals of getting off of an Excel spreadsheet and onto an actual platform that's designed for that, is to improve efficiencies. One of the other questions that we had was, if I run a small team now but hoping to grow, will most of these solutions be able to grow with me, or are there certain ones that kind of lean towards add-ons or other things that you can put into it so that you can use a couple features now maybe to save some money, and then down the line add more onto it as you have more team members?
Great question. So most of these do have the ability to grow. Some of them have different price tiers. So with the different price tiers, you get added functionality, which you might not need early on if you've got a small team. but as you grow, you can pay up to get those features. But I mean, I would say if you do grow vastly and you do get more complex, bigger projects, maybe a task management software is no longer what you need, and you do need a bigger project management. So there's no one size fits all, but I would say that most will allow you to grow with them, and then you can reevaluate as you get bigger. But you do have that flexibility with most all of these softwares.
One more question for you. This wasn't one of the ones that came before, but this was after kind of listening to you. I had this question. Time frame wise, say, okay, I know what I'm doing is wrong. I want to switch myself over to a better platform. How long would you say it takes from kind of saying, okay, I want to make that change? I know you had that 5-step process to go through the evaluation, to import all your data, and really from the standpoint of, the business won't be down, but obviously you're going to be in this transitional period while that's happening. What would you say is the average time it's going to take to say, I need to get off my platform when you're fully onto a new integrated platform?
Typically from our experience, it's anywhere from 2 to 4 months.
Okay.
So that time allows for that phase 1 discovery period where you have to interview multiple staff members. You really understand what they're doing and look at the software. And then you have the assessment period, then the implementation, and then the change management takes a while. Scheduling the sessions with the teams, all of that. Our experience has shown that it does wind up dragging on. I mean, in an ideal world, you could probably do it in 1 to 2 months. But in reality, there are other fighting priorities for time. It winds up stretching out longer.
And I'm assuming having an expert that's dedicated to helping you do it is certainly going to accelerate that time frame.
100%. And the reality is, having an expert that's done it before will just save you some potential costs and headaches. That's not to say that a company can't implement most of these softwares. They absolutely could. If you have someone that enjoys it and is interested in technology, you absolutely could. But if you don't have someone that can dedicate the time or have that expertise, then it definitely would behoove you to look to bring someone in to help out.
Awesome. No, I appreciate it. And I think that answers all the questions that I had from before. If anybody else has any questions on, please feel free to put them in the Q&A or put them in the chat, and we can certainly address them. And obviously we can follow up with them later as well. But thank you, Grant, for all that great information today. Again, like Dina said, we'll be back again next Tuesday. I'll be talking about business development in a digital platform. Obviously, life has changed a little bit. So, what do you need to do to change to prepare for that? I don't know if anybody else has anything else they want to say before we wrap up today, but I think today was a great session and really appreciate it, Grant.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Thank you, Grant. All right. Enjoy your day, everyone. Bye-bye.